Again, thank you. Another Friday morning where we're kind of discussing. Today we're going to be continuing our steering committee discussion, brainstorming some of the characteristics and perspectives that we want to see on the steering committee, and then start to put pen on paper and think of names, whether from this group or some of your colleagues, who should be nominated and thought to be reached out to either by you or by us. And so we'll discuss that as well. We also got the chance to put our heads back together, a few of us, and start to make just a few edits, changes based on the discussion that we had last week, to the steering committee structure. And we'll do just kind of a quick vote on that, as a group today, so we have our structure in place, and are able to move forward, with putting names, to the structure. And so Carlos last week so eloquently kind of put together what we currently have in the region, and how this might fit into, that current structure. I'm not going to steal too much of that thunder, from you, Carlos. And so I'm going to pass it over to you to kind of go over the structure, discussed, and talk about some of the maybe changes that have happened over the past few days.
Okay, great. Thank you, Michael. And I am going to honor people's time and keep this presentation short and crisp. Please work. Okay. Carlos Ayala. As you know, there is this K-16 funding coming down the pike, that we will see the RFP for on April 1, is part of a larger structure of money coming in aligned to the workforce. This K-16 collaborative money is money that's actually in a higher education budget, which is not normally a place where you would see workforce money flowing directly. And so this makes it a unique opportunity for us. And I think this is the opportunity to further align higher ed and the workforce together. And so this is the opportunity that we're working towards, of course, serving the students in the Inland Empire. The funding is for this purpose and these 4 areas. No decision has been made about the areas, whether we're going to focus on one or the other. So we're proceeding with 4. That decision will come down later when the steering committee is formed. We know that the collaboratives must include a collection of folks. And this discussion today is about, my discussion with you today is about the establishment of this steering committee. Sorry, I skipped a page. The other component of this grant is that we need to embed within the grant proposal these ideas of recovering with equity. This report is available. If someone could drop the link to the report in the chat, that would be helpful. The way that I see this is a way to kind of weave together the different pathway programs, thinking about what kinds of supports are necessary to help students succeed in our region, and understanding with the excellent work groups or the excellent pathways that are already in place. They already have identified issues that they need solved to move things forward, and many of those things fall right in line with these. So I think we're going to have a great opportunity to kind of build this tapestry of the work of the pathways and the equity targets or the equity initiatives. The last week I went through a discussion about how GIA can serve as a convener for this work. A lot of the GIA will be the convener. GIA will not be the decider. The K-16 Pathways Steering Committee will be the decider on how money flows, and GIA is there to support the steering committee moving forward. And of course, having representatives from the existing collaboratives, IEGO, the Alliance for Education. There's so many that are here. We'll need to be a part of this too, because we need to build from the great work that we have going on in the region already. The way that that we're thinking about how this is going to play out is that the steering committee will provide oversight to the 4 pathways. Decisions about which pathways are ready to submit in the one comprehensive grant that we submit to the state will be the steering committee's recommendation. And GIA will just facilitate the steering committee in preparing that document. There's another organization, a lead educational agency. This could be a K-12 school district, a county office, a UC or a CSU or a community college or a community college district office. And they are actually the ones that have to submit and will receive the money. As that money flows down, I anticipate the money will flow in this direction from the state to the lead agency as a pass through GIA to the steering committee, to the educational pathways, to the priorities that the educational pathways have identified. So each one of these pathways will identify a set of priorities that need to be funded within this particular domain, taking into account the equity with recovery initiatives. That information is fed to the steering committee. The steering committee makes a decision about which ones of these are the strong ones that we can push moving forward, and then that information is decided upon, and then we facilitate with that flow of resources going down to these regions. We have done this before. The original Governor's Innovation Award was this process. We had a lead agency, Cal State San Bernardino. The money flowed through us out into specific targets. Our action network teams actually were these specific things, specific priorities. If you remember back at the beginning of the pandemic, money flowed out to organizations to support students in their pathways. I'm having a discussion with my board today, who represent many of the lead agencies, and they are going to offer up a recommendation to the steering committee on which lead agency would be the appropriate lead agency, a recommendation to the steering committee. So what we are talking about today is the composition. I'll stop. Any questions?
I have a quick question. So
Yes.
the participant agreements, if we decide to come on in with this, they will be with us and GIA, or is GIA going to be the fiscal sponsor? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, GIA will not be the fiscal sponsor. So the LEA would be a fiscal sponsor. So let's say Henry at the meeting today pushes the Chafee be the sponsor, and he has a great rationale for that purpose. The money would flow into Chafee. They would, or whichever. Once the steering committee makes that recommendation, let's say the steering committee recommends Chafee, then that money would flow from Chafee out into the organizations. Who writes the contracts? Who writes the contracts with a pathway program in Apple Valley? Who writes the contracts with a group of a CBO out near Joshua Tree? Well, we have the ability to do that very easily without a lot of the bureaucracy of the institution. And what we do is that we serve as an intermediary between the LEA and the different pathway programs. And the oversights provided by the steering committee, they're the ones making those decisions. Reports would be presented to the steering committees to make sure those things are moving forward. I think, Ray, that's the most transparent process.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this is Michael eloquently alluded to some conversations that we've been having about the formation of the steering committee. The page looks a little different than it did last week because there are groups in the steering committee that are actually selected, and those that would be voted on at large many of these, some of these down here are elected in subgroups, while others would be folks that we would reach out to, IEGO and GIA would reach out to bring into the steering committee. So let me start here at the bottom and the selected ones to just give you the thinking on that. We would reach out to Chancellor Wilcox and President Morales to find out who is the institutional rep for each one of these institutions. These chairs, the chairs of the pathways and the employers, they are going to be the folks that are embedded within these specific pathways. So the folks that are in these groups are actually coming from the pathways, and the pathways are making that determination, not the group at large, but the individual pathways, recommending who are the best representatives to move forward. And we anticipate that we could get 4 employers, 1 from each pathway, embedded in this work too. We would reach out to the county to see who would be the best workforce representative. Bringing in the county workforce, we believe, will be an important component. These up here will be voted on at large. And what we are hoping to do today is to get some names of some folks that we could begin reaching out to. We will actually open nominations next Friday. We will let those nominations run for 6 days, close right before the meeting on the 24th, and then we would open up voting on the 24th. IEGO and GIA will do our due diligence. Anybody who's nominated, will reach out to them to see if they want to play. And then we'll begin a voting process. Who gets to vote? Anybody who's attended any of these meetings will get to vote. Questions?
So Carlos, then the selected are already like the core members of the steering committee. And then what we're going to be looking for is to add additional members from that top group. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, we
To
don't.
vote on?
Yeah, Ray, we don't have anybody at any of these positions yet. So I don't know about the use of the word core. And these right here, the chairs and the employers, we haven't formed these pathways. These pathways aren't ready to make the decision as to who their chair is going to be. I can speak to President Morales and speak to President Chancellor Wilcox about this, and we can reach out to the county to see who would be the most appropriate person. These have yet to be identified. They will probably be the last people we have coming in.
Okay, so is our goal to try to get representation on that steering committee from some of those major groupings like post-secondary, secondary, maybe as a second, group, maybe community? Is that what we're trying to do, is get a like diverse representation?
Yes. Right here, right in this group, right up here.
Okay.
The ones at large. These are the ones that we would go through the nomination process for.
I like the idea of having students on there too. That's really cool.
So a question.
Well, Carlos, I have a question. If you don't mind, raise my hand.
Yes, Jay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry,
thank you for the opportunity to speak. I mean,
Jay,
there are some of the
who are you, Jay? I don't know who you are.
I am. My name is Jay Varzande. I am the professor of logistics supply chain at CSUSP and also the chair of the Information Decision Science Department.
Okay.
Okay. And during the past 4 years, we have had some of those issues that you discuss in here, such as pathways. We have a pathway to logistics, pathway to cybersecurity, and we have directed and coordinated those activities in the Inland Empire, and right now is extended to the PDC. The question is that you mentioned that for determining the chairs and also who's supposed to serve in those group, you're going to reach President Morales and this and that. May I suggest that based on what really the department and also the colleges have done, and we are participating right now in your meeting, make the nomination of those people who really been actively involved, as opposed to, I know that IEGO and also other institution that you refer, they might have some reference, but on the hands-on practice and hands-on, I know that I work with Summer Steel during the summers for Gear Up and also CalSoap. So we are more informed of who actively been doing things, and can we have the chance of nominating our own representative as opposed to reach the IEGO or somewhere else that they might not be as informed as we are.
So Jay, I'm going to go back to the slide up on top. And this is actually the reason why we have the word selected down below here, because of this. Hold on a second, I'm trying to get my screen back to work. So where you're having those discussions, let's say cybersecurity discussion, that's going to happen in these individual pathways right here. And so you will have an opportunity to have your voice represented on the steering committee, because you actually will have 2 votes on the steering committee coming from this particular pathway. And the folks the institutional representatives that are here would be at an associate vice president or vice president level from the CSU, or vice chancellor, whatever, from the UC. So these 2 serve a different purpose. The folks that you are identify are listed on here. They are right here.
Okay, I'm happy to hear that, because I'm not concerned about the CSU, one person to be represented by CSU, but definitely for chairs of the pathway, it should be determined, as you suggested, internally, because this is who we are and we more informed than others.
Absolutely. Summer,
thank you.
Summer, then Chinaka, then Alex. Raise your hand if you have a question.
Thank you. So mine is actually going back to like the at-large. So when I'm looking at who, because I just want to know who I should be nominating. So for the 4 K-12, 3 community college districts, for instance, do we know which, when we're looking at 4 K-12 for the steering committee, have we identified which K-12s are going to be a part of this project? Because that might help determine which K-12s we might want to nominate to have someone for the steering.
Yeah, no, we haven't. And I anticipate that there will be 30 K-12s.
Okay.
That would be my guess, the participating in this.
Okay.
Yesterday, we heard from folks from Trona and from Mecca about this. So, there are 56 school districts. I don't think all of them are going to participate, but I think more than half will. So that's my number 30 out there.
Okay, and the same thing with the community colleges, because all of the ones that we have in our region, if we're looking at 3, same sort of a scenario. We're just going to nominate and then hope that they end up in the project.
Right. If it's, I think the way it will play out, Summer, is like this. Let's say, for example, someone's nominated, we reach out to them, either IEGO or GIA reaches out to them and say, hey, you've been nominated for the steering committee. They'll go, what? We don't know anything, we don't have anything, we don't know anything about this, what's going on? Then that might entice them to participate more in this work. And so I anticipate there's going to be more and more alignment. And even if we don't get it right this first time, one of the tasks of the steering committee is to set up a rotation schedule so that we can perfect this as we begin to move forward. We need to learn from we need to learn and modify ourselves based on what we're hearing from the community. And this is just a place for us to get started. That's the way we're thinking about it right now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Sure. Chinaka and then Alex.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak in response to the comment from Jay. I want to request for all who are from CSUSB, if you are part of a college, I would really encourage you to connect with your deans and have a conversation, because yesterday we had a meeting and all the deans, apart from me, said they had no idea about this and their colleges were not involved. There is need for us to have a better coordination at CSUSB as we are speaking about representation. I think there is need for us to have better coordination. So if anybody here is part of a college at CSUSB, please connect with your deans as soon as possible and bring them up to date as to the scope of your involvement and what is going on. Thank you.
So, okay, Chinaka, we have the list. You'll be getting it in a few minutes that you could share with the rest of your deans. And if anybody else wants a list of who's attending, more than welcome to share it with you. Alex?
Thank you again for putting this together. This is absolutely brilliant and amazing. And just want to acknowledge that because this is definitely not easy. And I understand that everybody's not going to be part of the steering committee. But I do like is that there's an opportunity for us to probably engage the steering committee if we don't make the session. So I'm assuming that the steering committee one is going to have like kind of a strategic plan or listening plan, and maybe invite others. And I'm assuming that's kind of the structure, like just trying to get input to figure out what direction to go with the grant. That's not what my assumption is, but I could be wrong.
If there are other recommendations to bring forward to the steering committee, please let me know. We'll make sure we get them there. Great ideas, Alex. James?
Yeah, we just had a little side conversation in the chat about where the privates fit. And we're sort of in an interesting position that as the UC's applications have gone up and the Cal States are doing pretty well, some of them, not all, ours are going down and the community colleges are also going down. So some of us have excess capacity and some of us don't. And so I think when Alex says, yeah, some of the, or other speakers said some of the deans aren't interested, that's because they're already overloaded and they're already at capacity. So we tend to thrive at Redlands when the other schools are full. So that's also, I think, an opportunity. So I'm happy to serve on a and continue to be a member of a pathway committee. And my friend Steve and I are working on getting people to be from Redlands in those other pathway committees. But we do represent a big chunk of higher education in this region. And so I think that's kind of a question for the group of, does that merit a seat on the steering committee so we have a voice? And I really am happy we've got Wayne here from Cal Baptist, and I just saw somebody from University of Laverne. We play in this space and we want to play with everybody else. And I think the opportunity to collaborate is very welcome on our campus. We're getting support from our new president and from our provost. So, and I would trust my colleagues from any of these other privates to represent my interests on that, if the group thinks that's important. There's certainly a bias in the language of the grant towards the public universities, and that's fine. So that, and I'd rather pose it as a question. It's not a demand. It's just sort of a question of, are we only going to have a voice in those pathway groups, or do we get a voice at the larger level? And in that case, that would be somebody at the VP. Would that be a selected one where we would put somebody on there, and we would just maybe among the privates agree, oh, you'll take it now, like a rotational thing? I think is pretty cool. So sort of with the same reasoning of the community colleges. Or do we just become one of those community-based organizations? That doesn't seem right either, because I don't want them to lose a voice. So I just wanted to put that in front of the group for conversation. And I love being part of this, and I've been working with GIA, and there's my friend Ida. We're very excited to be part of this collaborative, but we also, it's more a question, where do we fit in this? Thanks.
Other thoughts on that line in particular? Ray, is it in response to it? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I know it's always interesting dynamic when you're creating the steering committees, because you want them to be inclusive, but not too large and so forth. But I agree with a lot of what James just stated. I think if we're coming at this as a regional group, it would behoove us to try to get as much as possible, so that it doesn't get unwieldy, representation from each of those areas. It's kind of like why I asked that question to begin with. just so that when we're looking at needs and we're looking at solutions, it's more holistic in nature and kind of avoids that, the breakdown from the handoff. So from like secondary to, community colleges, from community colleges onto the universities. It's just good to have that voice. So I agree with what James is saying, that if there's room for representation from each of those areas, it would be good.
Okay. I'm going to take that as a recommendation to modify this. And I need to hear if that would push somebody to a space where they could not support this idea. And what I'm thinking of doing, and I will do it right here in front of you all, hopefully. I think I have to stop. Let's see, how do I get out of the presentation mode? Oh, there we go. Sorry about this.
Go to that other screen and click the red button that says stop sharing.
Yeah, I actually want to continue sharing, James. So just give me a second.
Something else.
What I'm trying to do is stop presentation mode that I'm in is what I'm okay. I'll stop my share. Maybe that's the only way I can do it. So, but Michael, can you do a quick request out to the group that if we add a private nonprofit representative, post-secondary representative to the selected list or elected list, could you ask that question to the group and see if there's anybody who wants to discuss it while I modify this PowerPoint?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So you all heard the question, but I could ask it again. Is there interest in this, in adding privates to the conversation? I will say that I personally think it's a good idea to somehow. I think the method of which we do it is going to be the challenge, but I see the wave of hand raised. Shanaka.
I was going to wait for you to finish. My thinking is, again, Carlos, going back to the conversation we had yesterday. At the end of the day, the amount of money that is coming to the region may not be as much as to get everybody working as hard as needs to be done. So it's important for us to look at how much money we are looking at, the amount of work that is needed for that money, and know if there is need for us to scale the scope one direction or the other. I'm just putting it out there. It's important for us. We know that it's a large amount that the state has announced, that has been announced, but how much of it at the end of the day comes to us as a region? And can we look at that and make sure that we're not going to put too much effort into work that may not have as much proceed as we think?
Yeah, that's a good question that you raise, and a really good point. We know that the grants will be about $15 to $20 million per region. How that gets divided up, I think, is going to be the major question in a few months, but we at least know that grants are going to be within that range. Graciela?
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael. And I think thank you so much for bringing up the conversation in terms of private and nonprofit. I think we have to really think about our population and our young students and just the students in general. Not everyone has accessibility to go to a CSU or a UC in the region. And a lot of the nonprofits are already kind of doing the work already and partnering up with those institutions to create credential programs for them, especially a little bit on the business side. When we were talking about in the small groups, we were talking about the work that's already being done. So I completely agree that, private nonprofits should definitely have the opportunity to speak. And yeah, thank you so much, Michael, for asking that.
Absolutely. And thanks for your perspective. Alex?
Sorry, technology, you think I would know it by now. So this is another thing to consider and to throw out there for the group. If we get this grant, it's an opportunity to get possibly more funding. This is just, it's not a lot of money, and I agree with that. So we understand everybody's not gonna fit into this specific grant. Um, but if we are successful in this manner, it opens us up for more opportunities. So I'm hoping that the folks that are here are not just here for this one time, but we're here for the long haul because there's more opportunities out there. This is not the last of it. And if we're successful, we can actually, as a collective, directly go to the state and make a presentation. We don't have to wait for an RFP or a grant. We can actually make a proposition. And so, anyway, so I just put that out there that it's not a lot of money, but there's an opportunity to open up maybe a funnel that can come into our region as we try to figure out how to work together. And that's just my proposition or a suggestion. So don't think of it as, oh, I'm just here because I'm here for the money, but think about the opportunities for our communities, our students, and our businesses in the region if we are successful with this. So I just wanted to just toss it out there.
You got a lot of agreement on that, Alex, in the chat.
Sure did. And I think what you're kind of pointing to is building out some of that capacity within the region to have those conversations with state lawmakers, and what you might be referencing is budget asks in trying to get a legislator to put in a budget ask to support some of this. And I think it's only fitting that Julian goes right after you in that part of the conversation.
Thanks, Michael. Good morning, everybody. I think just logistically, right, knowing that this money is coming from the state, we'd have to see what those parameters are and how those dollars could be even invested in private schools. It's not a should we or could we, it's more can we. And I don't think we'll know that answer until we get that RFP, right? As to, could the voice be there? Absolutely. But is the private university, are the private universities going to be comfortable knowing that you're going to be coming to the table every day or every week, knowing that you're probably not going to get a slice of that pie because it's state funding that may not be able to be invested in private universities. And that's just a logistical policy, like blunt way of putting it. Especially, I'm not sure how many of you attended, there was a nonprofit session that took place last week earlier this week with the League of California Community Foundations, Cal Nonprofits. We had a representative from the governor's office talk about SURF funding, right? And how the way that they were able to build more flexibility with those $600 million for that pot is that the ARPA funding that came from the federal government, the state used that money, the $600 million, to handle some, I don't know the technical terms of it, there was a tax issue that they were able to use it for. So they used that, right? They moved that money there, the $600 million, to handle that. And then the state moved $600 million from the state funding into the SURF pot. I don't know if they did the same thing with K-16 collaborative funding, but if they did, that does provide more flexibility for the state to do stuff, but it is state funding. And as you all know, right, the state funding goes to public service, public oriented institutions, and a sliver of it, because there is law there that indicates that the state does have to provide some funding to private institutions. I just don't know if the flexibility will be there for this grant opportunity. And I just want to be very blunt about that, as uncomfortable as that might be.
Thanks for that.
Yeah. Are there more questions? May I continue? May I speak again?
We have one more hand.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and I really appreciate everyone's comment here, because I think regardless of the funding, the opportunity to have a voice and be a part of the collaborative is so important, because we are also supporting the workforce in the region, and we are a massive region that we're trying to address. And so, I mean, as a nonprofit private institution, I my hope is that this conversation doesn't end here. There's funding funneled, or through certain avenues here and there, but the fact that I would love to continue to have these conversations and partnerships with this group in hopes that, while we are creating these pathways for the K-16 students and serving the same students, over a majority of our students are on Pell Grants. It's really important that we understand, like, for example, there's a lot of shortages in different areas. I represent our healthcare. We have a new College of Health and Community Wellbeing. We're not striving to be the best, medical school, because we're not a medical school, but there's a lot of health and mental health needs that we are trying to address in the region. And it's really important that we have the support, and we support you and what your endeavors are, regardless of whether we are part of the grant or not. But the fact that we are able to still continue to work with this collaborative.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eileen, for sharing that. Carlos?
Yeah, so I think that I concur with Alex, and I'm going to describe it a little bit differently. And I'm channeling my colleague Carol Tashima, who I think is on this call today.
Yes.
Yeah, there's this idea of us not chasing money, but chasing work. And she said that yesterday. It's like my mind went kind of blew up. In that, what we are doing here is that we are creating an infrastructure. And what Alex and others are talking about is this idea of creating an infrastructure that's going to survive beyond this one pool of money. Because Shinaka's right, $20 million divided by 4 years across 4 programs, if we choose to, if the steering committee chooses to do that, that becomes a pittance. But what it does, this infrastructure does, it sets us up for success later down the line. As Alex said, we can go straight up to the governor's office. We can start approaching other large foundations, say, look what we have in place. Look at the successes that we are having. We are building on all of the successes of all of our partners, building this moving forward. And I think that right now it's really important for us to think about being inclusive in this space and building this inclusive table and thinking about how we keep it transparent, how we can show the community that we're working together, because not everybody's here. We're going to need to be able to bring more people in to do this work. And so we need to represent that transparency. So the steering committee composition is what we are, this is our first hypothesis. We're going to test it now. And we will make modifications to it. And I think we should add the privates in here. And I know, Shinaka, that ultimately this money is going to be, distributed out into pots, and it's not going to be one big amount going to one specific program, and there'll be people left out, but there will be more opportunities, and we're just building that infrastructure.
And I just added a comment on the chat that I'm all for a collaborative that goes beyond this grant, which involves everybody.
Okay.
But we need to look at the scope of work involved in just this grant. No, if we are going to build a collaborative that is going to last for longer engagement, I'm 100% in support of it.
Great. Thank you for that, Shinaka. Okay, so what I would like to do is I'm going to share my screen again. I'm sorry, team, I've taken up all the time today. Sorry. But we have to go slow to go fast. So this is what we're proposing. We added the privates here, selected at large, so we'll get nominations, and then they'll be part of the voting process. These are selected as we described before, and the new numbers are going to be like this. We need to add an additional employer to this group. Let me get rid of that. It's so hard to edit the document while I'm on Zoom. So, but we're looking at adding an additional at-large employer by adding this one private to hit that 25%. This chart right here is no longer viable. Because we'll need to add one more employer to hit the 25% mark. So what we are proposing is this. And what I would like to do now, and this is going to be a new opportunity for us to learn how to do this together, is that we're going to use five-finger consensus model. If you can, or if you are comfortable with this proposed idea, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand and show me whether you strongly agree with this idea, whether you agree with it, whether you will go along with the group's decision, or whether you disagree or you strongly disagree. And if you are a 2 or 3, you need to be very vocal about that, because we may not be able to see everybody. There's quite a few of us on this call. So I'm asking the question, are you comfortable with this steering committee composition so we can move forward? Please show me your hands.
Carlos, I want to raise that not everybody is on camera. And so
Okay.
maybe folks who are camera off, feel free to throw it in the chat, or everyone could throw it in the chat as well.
And if you can keep your hands up, because we're trying to scroll through all the everybody. Okay, so Jennifer.
Are there any threes? I mean, are there any 2s or 1s? I'm looking for 2s or 1s. I'm calling for 2s or 1s. Not hearing any 2s or 1s, meaning that you object to this, you want to continue to talk about it. I think we've reached a consensus, people. I am so proud of us. Right on, this is great.
Carlos, before we celebrate, Graciela did unmute, and I wanted to.
So sorry, I'm gonna be the bummer of the group.
Oh no, that's okay. Oh, that's okay. I didn't hear you. That's all.
I completely agree with the whole, the large. Maybe we can add a couple more students. How would that? Are folks a little bit more comfortable with that? Just because, in a sense, yes, we're all here to create this plan, but at the end of the day, it is for our students. So how would y'all feel about that?
I would just say the students are more likely to participate and collaborate if they have some sort of, at their student level support among their peers. So if you have 2 or 3, I think they'll start to talk and participate more actively. So I agree. I think it'd be good.
There was a suggestion that there be a student at the K-12 level, 1 at the community college level, and 1 at the 4-year in the chat.
Well, there's good news. I'm busy doing another. I have a little Excel document running on the side here. We can add 2 more students and not have to add any more employers, which is what I was trying to. I'm trying not to have too many people. We'll have 32 people on the steering committee. If we did this, we still meet our target. We can do 3, and we still hit our 25% goal of employers with this representation.
And Carlos, I'm sorry, this is Dina. That does still include one of those students being a community college student as well, right?
That's right. What I just heard is 1 from each sector.
Okay, excellent.
Okay.
As we're also in this in the conversation of students, and Beth raised that great idea. I believe Joseph brought it up earlier in the meeting in the chat.
Yeah. Joseph.
And we discussed it last week, but I'm personally keen on having a student advisory committee to this work, and I just wanted to push that and see whether we'll come back to it once the steering committee is in place. But a three is not enough, and so we'll need to have another group to also advise some of the work on the side, if the steering committee agrees with me on that.
That's separate from this decision.
Yes.
All right.
This is Joseph. Another option that you can consider is the K-12s and the community college they have associated student governments, and they all have I think most of them have a student representative, but as a part of their role, being responsible for convening and making sure that you got a student voice as a part of this.
We will need to recruit folks for that, Joseph, and that's probably one of the ways that we'll do that. And I know that there are other students on campuses who don't have a voice, and that this advising or this advisory group that Michael's talking about, I think would be an important thing to push forward, to bring in a lot of those different groups together to give more access to students. These are great ideas. Okay, I'd like to go back to this vote. Are there any twos or ones now?
Sorry, Carlos, I hate to interrupt.
No
Alex raised his hand, and I want to make sure we elevated a voice.
I'll be quick. So I just looked. So all right, let me be as quick as possible. I looked at the chart that you had created, and if I'm right, the steering committee and the pathways would be education, health, business, and engineering, sci-fi, right? Um, if we're going to include students, they are the future. I feel like the creatives and the arts, it's the leading industry and it's the leading economy. Should be a pathway. So you talk about metaverse, you talking about this. That's a whole industry that's been booming, and if students are involved, I think they'll be excited about that whole next evolution. But that's just me. Has nothing to do with the vote. I love the vote. I'm down for whatever we got. I'm just saying, adding another maybe link there to that pathway. That's all.
Alex, I think the idea that you talked about before, and that others have mentioned, that we're chasing the work, not the money, and that we're building infrastructure we need in our system. This K-12 collaborative that we're establishing right now is focused on that grant, and I anticipate there will be other pathways coming down the line that will be identified, and we will need to find ways to support those other ones. Specifically for this grant, those are the ones that we've identified, but I anticipate that there'll be more, and that is another crucial area. And we have data to point out, why these 4 pathways, as well as the grant, why these 4 pathways are important. I'd like to bring us back to the decision about the steering committee composition. Are there any 2s or 1s with respect to the steering committee? And we'll give it 30 seconds. 2s or 1s?
James, I see your hand is up.
That was just my 5-finger vote.
Okay.
Oh.
All right, we're not hearing any objections. Michael, do a double check for me.
I am not seeing any objections. I would encourage folks who object to also unmute to make sure that we don't miss you.
Yes, please do. All right, so go ahead. I'm done, sir. Back to you, Michael.
All right, thank you, Carlos, and thank you everyone for really engaging in this. This is not an easy thing to do or figure out, especially as a community. So I appreciate your patience with us, and for sharing all of your perspectives. So what I'm going to do is share with you all a Jamboard. Some of you maybe were there at our very first webinar. So we're bringing the Jamboard back just for the next few minutes. I know we don't have too much time. So if you want to click on this link, and I'll also share my screen so that you can see what I'm referring to here. So this Jamboard has 2 pages. The first page is what characteristics, perspectives do we want to be represented on the steering committee? This is where we think about, I put a sample here for educators, and maybe you might want to put, for example, we know that we're going to have workforce, but this is a chance to be more specific. This is a chance for us to brainstorm before we put the names out of who we're looking for. And this will also influence some of the language on the application itself. This will influence maybe some of the folks that other people in this room are thinking. And then the second page is to start thinking of names or groups. And so I put sample workforce person from IECF just as a sample for you to see. But also heard a note that Rialto USD wants to get involved. And so maybe that's who we specifically want to see involved. And so this is a chance, again, for you all to include your perspectives. You just click this sticky note right here, and you can add a note. I'm just going to do kind of this random one so you can see how it happens. And that's how you add something there. And you all can edit it. You should be able to have editing access and add your perspectives. I'm seeing in the chat from Julian, thank you. Can we build a safe space for those who may be a 1 or a 2 to follow up if they're not comfortable being put on the spot? Absolutely. If I may volunteer as a safe space, feel free to private message me. If you're a 1 or a 2, and maybe we can chat offline or off to the side. And I'll also loop in Carlos as well, or anyone else that you feel like would be appropriate. But please, I'd love to make sure that folks feel comfortable with what we're moving forward with. And feel free to start populating these Jamboards. I see folks are really going. Actually, I see that there's kind of a pile here that's getting created. So let me start to move some of these around.
You can move your stickies around. If you could name people, that would be very helpful because we want to reach out to people.
So I'm seeing here, hope you don't mind me looking over at my monitor. For some of the characteristics, we want business, we want connectors and collaborators, people who are focused on the big picture as opposed to their own organizational needs. If I can kind of put an exclamation point on that one. Collaborative with strong growth mindset, changing mindsets around what's possible. One of the Black Brown Collective, CBOs that work with IEGO, directors of cybersecurity programs in the region, nonprofits already working in coalitions and collaboratives, people who understand labor market data. These are all really important. I'm glad y'all are really populating this and putting in some really crucial information here. Knowledge of economic and workforce dynamics in the region. That's crucial. And all of these perspectives are going to be really important. I'm going to slide over to the next page just for a little bit to elevate some of the voices that we're seeing here. Who specifically? San Bernardino County Workforce, i.e. DRC, that's the Desert Region Consortium, Moreno Valley College, Uplift San Bernardino City Unified, Dr. Avila from Rialto Unified. Okay, CSUSB representative for diverse population. Seeing a lot of San Bernardino love, which I so appreciate here, but make sure you're adding to the second page as well, as we see this first page really getting popular. Yes,
Michael, we need names of people. If they could put names of people. Sure.
Folks, if you know who you want, feel free to put a name there. I see we have a name. We have a name here, but feel free. We're going to kind of digest this together. We're going to reach out to people. We also want to make sure that you feel comfortable reaching out to folks who you think should be on the steering committee. We'll have the form ready for you next week. Maybe alert them that you want them to be a part of this, or alert us that we should reach out to them as well. So keep on populating this. I don't want to, I know that we're kind of running up on time here, and feel free to brainstorm. You can add to this later. It's not going anywhere. This link will be the same. You could also feel free to share with folks who maybe aren't able to be part of these conversations, but perspective still needs to be heard. Still seeing it being populated. And on the second page, seeing a few names being added here. Dr. Richard Hart from Loma Linda University. It's a warm name in my household. Lisa Kiplinger, Jim from Redlands, education prep programs, CBOs that span both counties. This is awesome. Thank you all for engaging on this. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because we're running up on time and want to make sure that maybe we answer any questions that are coming up. And also that we are able to see you all next week, same time, same link. Feel free to engage right in between meetings, and feel free to share your opinions with any one of us on the team.
For next week, Michael, our anticipation is that we'll have a little time for some pathway breakout. So if there are people that that you don't know that should be here that are not coming into specific pathways, or someone you think might be good on the steering committee, please invite them to attend these meetings. You can get the registration at where you registered for this event, and the pathway conversation will begin starting. And as Michael alluded to, we'll begin the official nomination process next Friday. Isn't that right, Michael? That's our plan.
Yep, well, the form is just about ready to go, ready to include the voices from today.
And if all goes well, we'll have a steering committee in place by April 1.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Thank you for your thoughts and perspective today. Bye.
Take care, everybody.